Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I am assuming that you can hear me fine. So thank you, Densei, for the invitation to speak at this wonderful location. I have not been to that part of upstate New York, definitely on my list, because knowing that I will be speaking at the Southern Adirondack, I just did a little geography, looked through it. What a beautiful place. Last summer, during the midst of the pandemic where things were uncertain, my family just could not stay here in Washington continuously. So we said, let's go someplace. It was summer, so we were looking for a little cooler weather. So we went over to the Finger Lakes and we highly enjoyed the Finger Lakes region. But I think at some point we want to go further north in the beautiful areas where you are residing. So thank you again for having me. The housing market has certainly been a positive surprise during the pandemic. And I hope everyone were able to adjust through it, but at least regarding the market condition, what an amazement, spectacular growth in terms of home sales and prices. Home prices just soaring during the pandemic. We are sensing some topping off, that is to say, with prices having risen so much, some buyers simply cannot buy. They don't have the down payment, so it's becoming more difficult for the buyers. And also at the same time, the rental demand appears to be rising. One of the things that we are looking for in the next couple of days is the Supreme Court ruling on the eviction moratorium. From NAR's perspective, we think this is a taking of personal property, and therefore we want to assure that the property owners have the right to evict. Now, at the same time, we don't want people who are struggling economically be thrown out, so that part of the NAR advocacy thing was to assure that there is a rental subsidy for those who need it. So if you are in a situation where you are a renter, someone who is not paying the rent to you, there's plenty of fiscal stimulus money. It's just that some of the state housing agencies are delayed by paperwork, but the money is available for the renters to tap into in order to pay the housing provider. But we want that clarity from the Supreme Court, which is just a matter of days, maybe tomorrow or the next day. But let's go to the market, and I speak better with PowerPoint slide. So let me put that onto the screen. Bear with me. Okay, so here we are. So as I mentioned, home prices have been quite spectacular. I have two graphs on the chart. Both are national data, not specific to the locality. I will go into the local market in a second. But what this shows is that home price growth of better than 20% in a single year, 12-month time span. We have never seen such strong price appreciation. So these are quite remarkable. But part of the increase in median price is due to more upper end market moving. So people are willing to buy more expensive property, and automatically that's pushing up the median price. The blue line is something called Case-Shiller. You may have heard it on the media. It's developed by a Nobel Prize winning economist, essentially to control for constant quality. It's a complicated equation, but trying to see for a typical homeowner, how are their prices changing? And the blue line also is spectacular at 15% price appreciation, strongest ever in that index measurement. So irrespective of how one is viewing it, price increases have been quite spectacular. Consequently, just in a single year, what we are finding is that, for example, a resident in San Francisco, if you happen to be homeowner, by the way, home ownership rate in San Francisco is very low, and many are renters, but if you happen to be homeowner in San Francisco, you have accumulated $160,000 in housing equity gain in a single year. But that is leading to more of a divide in the wealth because homeowner population is much small. If you go to the middle, you see New York, that's New York City metro market, including northern New Jersey, Long Island, parts of Connecticut. So New York City residents accumulated about $60,000 in a single year. And then you go to more affordable market towards the end, say Cleveland, there's a price appreciation. Homes are very affordable in Cleveland, but still a price appreciation of $21,000 just by being homeowner in the country, in that area. So let's look at the median home price in the Glen Falls metro areas, which will be the closest to your locality, and other nearby big city, which is Albany, the state capital. The blue is Albany, while the orange is Glens Falls. So back in the year 2001, can we believe that home prices, median prices were even under $100,000 in your local area? Just remarkably cheap, and you wish you had purchased 2 additional property back then. Then you saw some price increase initially, then sort of prices sort of flatten out for almost 10 years, and then now you are seeing a breakout and soaring prices. So I would say that in the past 12 months, in the Glens Falls region, one is looking at the gain of roughly $50,000 in housing equity, or I say the median price. Maybe some upper end market is moving, so the true equity gain may be a little lower, $30,000 or $40,000, but remarkable in terms of what has happened to the homeowner. And thankfully, up in upstate New York, you have home ownership rate that is much higher. New York City has low home ownership rate, but in your area, home ownership rate is definitely the majority, 2/3, even 70%. So when home prices rise, this is greatly benefiting many residents in your locality. But as I mentioned, home sales appears to be topping out. This is actual transaction, unit transaction. And I put that red line as a reference point for pre-pandemic home sales, what the home sales were doing before the pandemic. Then we had the lockdown. We cannot move. We cannot get out of our house. So people cannot buy a home. So you see the plunge. But once the economy reopened, sales simply surged. 2 impacts. First, record low mortgage rates. When the economy reopened, consumers were eyeballing amazingly low mortgage rates, too good to pass up, so they took advantage. The second reason is people want to get out of the big cities. They're saying, well, I don't want to be around where touching elbows with every people, so I want to go someplace where things are more quiet, more social distancing. So we saw a greater impact in smaller towns. So home sales soaring. But with the rise in home sales, it really elevated the prices, and now prices are becoming challenging for first-time buyers, not repeat buyers. Repeat buyers have no problem. They can sell, they have the proceeds, they can use it for down payment. It's the first-time buyers who are struggling, and as you can see, sales are beginning to come down, not as strong. We are no longer at that surge activity because of the affordability challenges. In fact, if we look at the mortgage application to buy a home, you can say this is the first step in the home buying process, get a mortgage. And mortgage application to buy a home is actually trending a little below pre-pandemic now, which may hint that expect even lower home sales. Now, your closing activity year to date is solid, up 20%. Densei, send me some statistics in your local area. Closing activities are solid, but the pending contracts are coming down. So again, reflecting the mortgage application to buy a home is also beginning to come down. But mortgage application is not all the demand for housing, because we know they are all cash purchases, and all cash do not need mortgages, and we have seen the cash transactions rise. So this is not truly reflecting all housing home sales. It's only reflecting the mortgage application process. So the prices are rising because we are at this historically low inventory levels. You are seeing it in your market. Normally, in a small town, the days on the market should be about 3 months, maybe 4 months. You list a property, 3 or 4 months, you find a buyer. But now it's about only 2 months in your local area. So, because of low inventory, things are moving a little faster, but lack of inventory is also hindering consumer choices. And this is also raising the prices, which is holding back sales. So why do we have this low inventory? And it's not only in your area, it's all across the country. You go to Texas, extremely low inventory. Tennessee, low inventory. The New York suburbs, low inventory. Low inventory is everywhere. So how do we get to this situation? And the answer is very simple. This is housing starts or new home construction, supply. You can essentially say this is a supply. Without going into detail, Harvard University Housing Center said we need to produce about 1.5 million new homes each year to account for demolition of very old buildings and population increases that is happening in the country. So the red line is what we need to produce. And if we go to the 1960s, the earlier portion of the chart onwards, some years we're a little below, other years we are above, to show that housing is a cyclical business. During a good year, don't spend all your commission income, save it for the rainy days. So it's a little up, little down. But look what has happened from 2007 onwards. We have been under average, greatly under average, not for 1, 2, or 3 years, but for 15 straight years. And cumulative effect of underproduction is that we have housing shortage across the country. The final 2 red bars that you see, that is my forecast. I think finally this year we may go above historical average, next year also. Builders, they're making money. There's an incentive to produce. I mean, there are some barriers like finding the skilled labor workers along with some of the lumber prices. So there are some challenges, but the builders, there is profit incentive. But even as we are producing a little above historical average, this is not sufficient to compensate for all the underproduction of the prior 15 years, which means that this housing shortage will not go away overnight. It's going to take some time. Now, one concerning point for the housing market moving forward is mortgage rates. The red line is the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. You see the decline from 2020 all the way to the January 2021 when it hit record low. Then it started popping up a bit, slightly, nothing alarming, but popping up. But if you look at the green line is what you see on the evening news, what the Federal Reserve is doing regarding monetary policy. And the Federal Reserve is in essence saying, we are going to have maximum liquidity. We will not raise interest rate in 2021. Maybe sometime in 2022, we would consider raising interest rate, but it's still far away, nothing to be concerned with. So the green line, they're not doing anything. Lowest possible interest rate. That's the Washington Federal Reserve. But the mortgage rate is already beginning to act up. And the reasoning is that blue line is beginning to rise. So what is that blue line? Blue line is the 10-year Treasury borrowing interest rate. US government is running a huge deficit, highest national debt, and they need to borrow money. Whether they borrow money from Chinese, whether they are borrowing money from German mutual fund, whether they are borrowing money from Wall Street, they need to pay interest to borrow money. And some people are saying, look, we are getting concerned about your high budget deficit. You may need to pay us a little higher interest rate in order to fund that deficit. So a blue line, I mean, in recent weeks, it's been trending down, but don't expect to go down. And I think it's going to trend up. And if that happens, automatically, that's going to push up mortgage rates. So a quick summary of this chart is that I believe by end of the year, Christmas, New Year time period, mortgage rate could average 3.5%. Today is 3%, but as you talk with your clients, if they're waiting until end of the year, it could be 3.5% because independent of the Federal Reserve, I think the mortgage rate could trend higher because of the rising budget deficit. Now, the reason for the rising budget deficit is, we provided the stimulus measure, we provided the income support, and also the infrastructure spending, which is, needed, the broadband access to a small community, all that positive, but it's not free lunch. We have to understand it's not free lunch, and the cost is coming in terms of rising budget deficit. Another concern is high inflation. First, inflation is very irritating. You go to grocery store, things are more expensive. As a realtor, you have to drive a lot. You go to gas station and you say, darn, it's taking up more of my money. So it's irritating, but the true impact will also come from higher mortgage rates. People who have been in the industry for a long period, or if you're a youngster, talk to your parents and say, what happened during the 1970s? Well, during the 1970s, we had 10% inflation, 11% inflation. What about mortgage rate back then? Mortgage rate of 15%, 16%. Hard to believe, 15% mortgage rate. And the reasoning for high mortgage rate is that when the lender lends the money out, the money that is returned to them would have lost value in terms because of inflation. And the only way to compensate for that loss in purchasing power of money is you have to charge higher interest rate. So if the inflation begins to pick up and stay stubbornly high, then mortgage rate again will tick up. And again, just repeating, I think by year end, mortgage rate of 3.5% is definite possibility. I hope it doesn't happen, but it looks like it's going to happen. So rising mortgage rate conditions. Core price inflation, try to look for more stable components. You eliminate food prices, you eliminate energy. So they're saying grocery prices are not important. The gasoline prices are not important. So let's eliminate that and see what's doing. But even as you eliminate the volatile components, it's still rising very strongly. Economists say 2% is ideal, but it's way above that. So again, inflation appears to be getting out of control a bit. White House, they believe that inflation is transitory. It's going to be high for a few months, and then it's going to go back down. But I'm not sure. If it goes down, then we will not have any problem with mortgage rates. But if inflation does not go back down, then we will have trouble with mortgage rates. So let's look at some of the components. Used car prices up 42%, because they're running into, new car production, they're running into chip shortage. I guess they need computer chips for all the car production. So many things are automated, so they cannot produce enough new cars. So demand for used car has risen, and it has greatly pushed up the prices. Gasoline prices up strongly. Airline industry is returning, so they're beginning to raise the fares. You have a home buyer, now they want to buy a new laundry machine, where it's very expensive, almost 20% higher. Bacon, 8% higher. New car prices it's expensive, but it's rising 6% above 1 year ago. The fruit and vegetable, very minimal. But look at rent. They're saying rents are rising 1.9% according to government, according to official government statistics. But when I speak with the apartment property managers and other private sector data, they're saying rents are rising 3, 4, 5%, not 1.9%. So there could be a slight mismeasurement, but even with all this consideration, the overall inflation is rising. But again, you can see is the gasoline prices really impacting realtors. So this is the rent data a little more carefully. We had a housing shortage, not only for home buying, but the apartment vacancy shortage before the pandemic. And that's why rents were rising 4%. But now they're saying the rents are rising only 2%. But I think it will soon turn up to 4% because now we have job creation condition, and some young adults who have been living with parents, now they're going to seek out their own apartment units. Let me now turn to the job market. This is the total number of jobs in the US over the past 20 years, from the year 2000. From year 2000 You see that slight little hump about 2007. That's an artificial hump in hindsight. We have clear vision, hindsight, and that was the subprime lending boom to the economy. I think many of you know that subprime lending busted. You lend money to people who cannot afford mortgages. You didn't check income documentation, and it imploded, led to the foreclosure crisis, and we lost jobs. But from low point in 2010, America experienced longest consistent job creation ever. 10 straight years of job creation. I remember Goldman Sachs in January 2020, before pandemic, January 2020, before the presidential election, they said U.S. economy is so strong, nothing can derail the U.S. economy. And they were hinting that President Trump is probably in a good position to get reelected, given this such a strong state of the economy. So that was the Goldman Sachs report in January 2020. Well, when the pandemic hit, we lost massive jobs. In fact, 10 years of jobs disappearing in a single month. In a single month of a lockdown, we lost 10 years of progress. But as the economy reopened, you see the job creation occur, and now we are returning almost back to normal, but not there yet. So we are not fully back up compared to pre-pandemic. And if we look at state by state, this is what it looks like. This is June, which is the latest data at a state level across the country. You see New York State down 8.6%. In fact, this is one of the largest decline compared to other states. So New York has been particularly hard hit. You can say New York City, is dependent on tourism. So without the international flights, it's going to hurt New York City. But another reasoning as to why New York State is suffering more is that Governor Cuomo had a stricter lockdown compared to other governors and for a longer period. So if you compare, say, southern states like Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, they're down minimally. In fact, the two western states, Idaho and Utah, are only two states with more jobs today compared to 1 year ago. Because realtors there say, even though they had a lockdown, businesses were always open. You could always go to the cupcake store, you could buy real estate, so nothing really closed down, so you really did not impact economy as much. So that is the trade-off that you see regarding whether you had a strict lockdown or more lesser lockdown. And of course, the goal is to contain the virus. We don't want, because with so much uncertainty, what is the right policy at that moment in time? I don't think anyone knows, but different governors chose different policy regarding that. So so I mentioned the job market is not fully back up, particularly in New York State, but job openings are at record high. When I walk through the neighborhood where I live, local stores, there's help wanted sign everywhere. You can say those are low wage industry looking for waitress, looking for cashiers. So you can say those are low wage industry, but there's job openings at the construction site. So job openings remain record high, even though total jobs are not fully back up. And if we look at the job market in the Glens Falls metro market, what you see is very steady community. At around 55,000 jobs, it's always steady, no real movement up or down. Then the pandemic hit, you lost 10,000 jobs. Now you are trying to climb back up, not back up fully, just as with many other cities and communities in the New York State. It's not fully back up, but it's been very, very steady conditions in the Glens Falls. The Albany market did see some growth from 2000 to 2020. That 10 years of growth, they did see some growth of roughly 40,000 job creation. Then during the lockdown, boom, they went down, even below the year 2000. Now trying to come back up, but there's still a long ways to go in the Albany market. I covered that. So let me go to the forecast. So the forecast is that home sales transactions, 2020 in a year pandemic, last year, remarkably, home sales increased last year. And 2021 will be better. And you try to remind yourself, did I just say that we are losing momentum in home sales because of high prices? And yes, However, we have to remember in 2021, we will have 12 months of home sales. Last year, we had only 9 or 10 months of home sales, and that's why we're getting that boost. But 2022, next year, I think the home sales will be coming down a bit. This is a nationwide forecast. I don't do local forecasts officially, but just looking at the job market, probably you will follow this trend in terms of sort of the percentage changes. And the final two chart is the office leasing. I show you the jobs recovery, but one thing that is not recovering is office leasing. All those skyscrapers in New York City, in Washington, D.C., Chicago, Boston, still remaining empty. Even as job creation is occurring, people are not interested in leasing new spaces because of this work from home. One silver lining to the pandemic, a lot of challenges health-wise and everything, is maybe America would have slowly transitioned to work from home for office workers. Slowly, they may have transitioned over the next 10 years. But pandemic simply forced that upon us, something we did not even think about it directly, and office workers are demonstrating they can work from home, equally efficient, equally productive. And companies are beginning to wonder, do we need office spaces? And because of this, we are beginning to see vacation home sales really taking off. Work from home can mean work from vacation home. Or consider some hybrid model. Come to office 3 days a week, but Mondays and Fridays you can work from home. Knowing that you have a long weekend, people may say, why am I in New York City when I can be far away in fresh air, say in Adirondack mountain region? So the vacation home sales are rising. I know that in Vermont nearby, it's just taking off. So one positive for your locality is this work from home could be one of the permanent feature of post-pandemic. I don't think we will ever return to 5 days a week, go back to office. It's going to be some kind of hybrid. And with that hybrid, there will be more usage of vacation home, which means the demand for vacation regions will be rising, certainly something that will benefit your area. So thank you very much for listening. And I think you are well positioned in the market, quite remarkable. So again, thank you for having me